Breedinum Radio, brought to you by Pertnear Outdoors, your source for all things deer hunting and the rut here in New York State, right in your backyard, so you can get up in the stand and pound them all season long.
So, welcome everybody to the second week of the Breedinum Radio series, where we're focusing on what's happening here locally in New York, and been quite a bit just from the Western New York area, but we're trying to broadcast across and get some intel from other parts of New York as well, so we can kind of all stay up to date on what's happening. And as everybody's moving into the weekend and making their plans for what they're going to do, they have an idea what people have been doing to be successful and what other hunters are thinking as they go out into the woods. So this week we'll have we have a couple more kill stories. A few guys that we are buddies with, including my brother-in-law AJ, harvested bucks over the last. I don't think they harvested any butts. That would be a personal discussion. But so we'll focus on the bucks because I don't think that other anyway. We're gonna.
It's in the Breedinum Radio though.
It is Breedinum Radio. I was thinking about butts. What are you gonna do? So we're going to get AJ on to hear his story. He was pretty excited about it. That was his best deer and only his second deer with a bow, so pretty pumped for him. So we're going to get AJ on, and then we got a couple other guys. But this week I wanted to catch up. Dad, Jimmy, and I have not had a chance to get on this together, the three of us, since we did our first episode. So wanted to get a chance to get the three of us back together and kind of talk about how our seasons have gone so far. So I guess, Dad, since you're the one that has show notes, what type of things do you want to chat about?
Well, I thought it was seeing the typical movement that we would see. There has been unusual, I've been obviously following along, and some of the large bucks that the guys have killed. It's a little early for that, but, getting them while they're on the feed patterns, it's proven fruitful. In the woods, I've only been hunting in Naples, so in the big woods, we're seeing good doe movement, plenty of young buck movement, and starting to see some big stuff up and around and hitting some of our scrapes. And interestingly, this past weekend, the weekend prior, there was some scrape, activity around our food plots and along the logging roads leading to and from. But up in the top of the hill, up in the big woods up there really wasn't any scrapes, and we hardly saw any rubs up there. And it was a whole different ball game this weekend. We're seeing scrapes open up in the areas where they usually are, up in that area, and saw a little uptick in the rubs, but really the scrapes was most profound up there. So Friday night, I don't know if you saw the picture, but I had a really, really nice buck in the Bull Meadow food plot before dark. So really a nice deer. I didn't know that because I didn't check the camera, but I sat in that stand Saturday morning and saw 7 between 9:05 and 9:35, and they're all coming up from down below, so I think they're working up to bed on the side hills. I did have a buck in that lower plot below me, that small little meadow to the north of me. And so I suggested to Chisel he might want to hit that and sit in that little ladder stand there. And so he ended up doing that Sunday morning and had a 6-point buck that just kept showing up. I think he came through the plot 3 times, multiple times within range, but he was on the move chasing does around. So the does would come in to eat, and he'd chase them out. And then a little while later, another set of does would come in and chase them out. I think he saw 8 there. So he had a good morning. But it's starting to see a little bit of that chasing. So most of my weekend was dominated. I hunted for a few hours each morning, and then after that it was all just camp maintenance and repairing my four-wheeler.
Do you want to explain what happened there? Because I don't know the story, and I certainly want to hear it. Yeah, I certainly want to hear it from you.
Well, we hadn't run that. If you remember, we hadn't run that since deer season last year. I think we didn't use it all winter. We got all those other machines. We were running 400 and everything. So the battery was bad. Come to find out, we couldn't get the tires to hold air. So I remember when I bought that machine, I told your mother we'd get 20 years out of it. And I was a little bit
you bought that
disappointed that
How old were Jimmy and I when you bought that for us for Christmas?
You guys would have been like 12 and 13. In that range, 11, 12, 13, somewhere in there. We bought it, I think, in 2000 for Christmas, and I figured I'd get 20 years out of it, and we almost did without any really major repairs, but the tires dry rotted and wouldn't hold air. Couldn't keep air into them, so I figured, well, might as well just put all new rubber on it. You know, the machine still ran good, so I put a new battery in it, all new tires, which was not cheap, and changed the oil, serviced it. It purred like a kitten. Everything was good to go. So I jumped over to work on the 400, which seems to be eating starters over the last few years. So I got a new starter and a new solenoid, hooked that all up, changed oil on that, new spark plug, kind of servicing that a little bit. And I tried the starter, and the solenoid must have been wrong, and the starter stayed engaged and wouldn't disengage even with the key off. So I was scrambling to get the solenoid unhooked, get the battery cable off it, which I did. And then I was switching back to the old solenoid and smelled some burning, and I was like, oh, God, I burned up that brand new starter, you know. And then it kept getting stronger and stronger, and I'm like, what the heck? And I look over, and the 300 was parked over not far, 10 yards from me or whatever, and that thing was, smoke was billowing out of it and under the seat. And so I ran over there and popped the seat off, and I couldn't see anything. It was all smoke and fire down around by the by the solenoid. So I ran over the other four-wheeler, got my 10-millimeter wrench, went over and unhooked the battery, and electrical fire went out. And so I was disgusted, and I went back to working on the 400. And then, of course, when I got done with that, I decided I had to see what happened there, and ended up digging deeper and deeper, and that machine was pulled the wiring harness out of it, and everything was burned up and melted together. And so that was quite a mess. And then I was going to bring it home and try and sort it out, and then Sunday I got pondering, standing there looking at Uncle Mike's four-wheeler, and I'm like, hey, that's the same thing as mine. I go, that's just a year older. I wonder if the wiring harnesses are the same. So I go, I should tear yours all apart and see what the wiring harness looks like and use that as a template, you know. So he's just looking at me like he didn't want me to tear his machine apart on, in deer season. But he had to deliver a load of wood to Livonia. And then he had to run an errand after that. So I helped him load up the wood, and the minute he pulled out the driveway, I started tearing his four-wheeler apart. I had mine up on the forklift up eye level, and I pulled the wiring harness completely out of his, untaped it all, and documented what all the wires were and everything, and used that as a template. And went over to my other one, and I didn't have any wiring stuff with me, so I was digging around in the toolboxes and stuff, and I found some old wire nuts and I had electrical tape. And I think I just used old wire nuts and electrical tape, and I taped everything back up. So that's not going to start on fire again or anything, will it? Yeah. I hope not. I unhooked the power lead there that goes to the battery. But anyways, I was tickled to death that I got the thing. I think before Mike got back from delivering his firewood, I had his wiring harness all taped back up, reinstalled. His four-wheeler was fine. Had mine running, so that was good. And then spent the rest of the day mowing the lawn, getting our final cut on doing lawn maintenance and stuff. And so, yeah, most of my weekend I didn't get to hunt as much as I wanted. We wanted to move some stands around, and had an absolutely beautiful weekend, which, quite honestly, on a bright, sunny, 68-degree day, I don't get real keyed up for the afternoon hunts up there in the woods, So it was a good day, good weekend to get everything done. But I'm really thinking they're going to be moving this weekend, starting on you'll start seeing some good seeking, see the bucks up and moving and checking these scrapes just with the uptick in scrape activity we saw last weekend. They were all freshened up. If you remember, I think we had a rainy day either Thursday or Friday. We had good heavy rain. Saturday morning, those scrapes were all opened up, freshened up, and since that rain, so they got on them hard. So that's kind of what went on with me for the weekend.
Do we have a cousin Eddie running around this year?
Well, he hasn't presented himself yet.
So there's
a couple of button bucks that are running around over there, and they come through at 10 yards and actually stopped and were sniffing around the scrape, and then I don't know where Mama was, whether a buck had cut her off of them or what, but no cousin Eddie yet. I was thinking about him when I sat on watch there Saturday morning.
So for everybody listening, was that 2 years ago we had a buck He was a yearling buck was it 2 years ago?
Yeah, I think it was two
years
seasons ago. Yep.
So 2 years ago, we had a yearling buck that we were seeing. He was on every trail camera from every camera on our property, spreading over 100 acres. This buck was at every camera, every scrape, every time we were out hunting, Saturday, Sunday, everybody would see him. So we named him Cousin Eddie. And sadly, we lost Cousin Eddie on Thanksgiving.
He would go. It almost seemed as though he hit every one of our tree stands every weekend.
Yeah.
We'd all come back and say, "Yeah, I saw Cousin Eddie. Yeah, I had him at 15 yards. I got him on video that one day." And then, then Joey came up to hunt, and Joey told him to take whatever you want, but don't shoot Cousin Eddie, But Cousin Eddie went up, and Joe didn't shoot him. But then Cousin Eddie bedded down about 20 yards, and after about an hour, Joe couldn't contain himself, and he opened up on him, and it wasn't pretty. But Cousin Eddie ceased to exist.
Yeah, he was a good man.
I haven't dubbed a new one yet this year, Bill.
All right. Well, I have faith we'll find one.
I got to tell you a funny thing though, because Mike said, "Hey," he goes, "You got those tires had to be over $500 on that 4-wheeler, didn't they?" I go, "Yeah." I go, "I'm sick about that, And he goes, "I'll tell you what." He goes, "I'll give you $450, and give me the tires because they'll fit my machine, and take that one to the scrapyard and go buy a new one." I said, I just paid like $530 for those tires. He goes, "They're used." He goes, "I just watch you drive around the yard." He goes, "I got cash right here." So he was funny. He was busting my chops, but
I am really surprised you didn't take him up on that deal.
I almost did, but the machine runs like $1 million.
John Deere's running a 0% financing special right now.
I saw that. I should have one for Bill Dan to ride around with me.
He'd love it. That's what a good grandpa would do.
And that's what an okay grandpa will do here in another, probably next year.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
All right. So you had a pretty fun-packed weekend. And
yeah. How about Jim's North Country trip?
Yeah. How'd that go, Jimbo? How was the Great White North?
There ain't shit up there.
Kind of reminded me why we hunt the southern zone.
Yeah. I mean, every time I go, I get all jazzed up. I just think it's going to be the greatest thing ever, and then you just never see anything. But Saturday morning, I sat on stand till about 9:30, 10 o'clock. Then I got down, started still hunting, and kicked up 2 deer right off the bat. No shots on them. And then I hung around the hill. I had set a camera back in the summer, and I could not figure out for the life of me where I put it. So I was trying to find that Friday, and I couldn't. So I went back up into there still hunting on Saturday, and was just about to give up, and I set my pack down next to a tree to take a break, and turned around, the camera was sitting there facing me. So found that camera and sat there, and the turkeys were going nuts, freaking yelping and gobbling and going crazy, and it was fun to sit there and
Were they really?
So, yeah, they're going nuts up there this weekend.
Awesome.
I don't know why, but so I ended up sitting there for a little bit and listening to that and taking a break, and moved off and got onto the south-facing slope that's real thick, about half the way down the hill to the bottom. It's just brutal walking through, and we got a couple good bucks on camera up there, and we saw one Friday night out in the field when we were heading into Tim's place, and he was running right for a spot where I'd seen the only scope that I found up there. He was running right to that, and then when I was still hunting, I was coming across below that where it's real thick, and I had one that about let me step on him, and I was in stuff over my head, and I never even got a look at the deer, but he couldn't have been 10 yards away when he took off, and there was a deer by itself right in line with where we saw him and where the scrape was, so I got to believe it was one of them bucks. But I trekked through that whole bedding area there on the side hill, and there was freaking beds everywhere and tracks running and does snorting at me, and I just couldn't freaking lay eyes on one to save my life for how thick it was in there. But, they had a bunch of stuff going on, the neighbors and the in-laws up at the lookout above that property, so I kind of knew I wasn't going to hunt there in the afternoon, so I just decided to go in there and blow it up and see if I could find some deer, and they were definitely in there, but they were all laying down. I think with the nice day on the tail end of all that crappy weather, I think they were laying low. I don't think they were out running around at all. So,
was that on public land, or was that on your father-in-law's property? That thicket there on the south-facing slope.
that's on his property. There's public above it that wraps around it, and I did hit on that some. But so I hunted that, and then in the evening I went across the street and I went up across his property and then way back into some public. I was probably close to a mile back in where a ridge runs up, or a creek bottom runs up through and kind of turns into a little swamp on top of the hill. And you can see the other side of the ridge, but it's all swampy in the middle. And
nice.
Just made for a nice spot to sit for the night. And it's tough right now too because they got all fresh leaves on up there, or coming down up there. So there's really not, unless you kick a deer up and it's running, you can't see deer runs or nothing, or scat or anything to tell where they've been hanging. So other than around the apple trees, which are all pretty much dropped at this point too, there's not much. Me and Tim were talking about it. It's like it is difficult right now to walk through the woods and get excited because you can't even tell where the hell they've been.
Right.
So, I mean, we covered some ground, and I covered some areas that I knew were good in the past, and Sunday we saw nothing, and we kind of did a couple of still hunts, me and my father-in-law, Jim, there. We put on a few still hunts, and nothing came running out, so we hunted till about noon on Sunday, and then had some stuff I had to do, and wrapped up and headed home. So not much to report from up there, but everything, it's funny because by the end of the hunt, you're all discouraged, and then by the time you get home, you're like, man, I want to go back up again. But it's just a day and a half doesn't seem like enough time to figure it out.
We got to get up there with a fresh snow.
Absolutely. I got the time that I had off for archery, I'm going to take that back. I might use a day or two, but I'm going to take back that time and plan on using it up north and around Thanksgiving. Hopefully they have some snow then.
Yeah. Well, what about you, Willie? Other than watching the Bills game, Billy, what did you have going this weekend?
Well, I had a pretty good weekend. Got out Friday night, Saturday morning, and Sunday morning. So Friday night,
nice.
I'm away home from work. I jumped out. I've done this a couple times so far this season. I stopped at this state land that's between work and home, and put in a little quick hanging hunt. So went back to the same area, just went maybe a couple 100 yards further in. So ended up running into a couple other hunters back in there. I was kind of surprised. I was the first vehicle there, and I wasn't even that early. I was there like 4:15, and then had two guys show up after I got there, and I heard their car doors shut, and I had looked back because it was a big field, and looking back across the field, and they were heading back, and of course I get down into the back of the woods. It's probably 3/4 of a mile from the road, and I'm standing there kind of just real slowly. It was really quiet. The wind was perfect in my face as I was trying to get down to this ridge. It's actually a spot where Danny and I, when we were turkey hunting this spring, we went for a turkey hunt over to this piece, and we had come across some really good deer sign and some rub lines and some beds, and there's a bunch of oaks on this ridge. So so I wanted to kind of, last time I was there, I didn't go too deep. This time I wanted to press a little bit further and try to get up close to that ridge in case there's anything that was going to be coming up from that to come up to those fields at night. And so I'm standing there maybe 20 yards inside the woods, and I heard something behind me out in the goldenrod, and I turn and look, and I'm like, there's a guy right there. And this guy's just motoring through the goldenrod, not trying to be quiet at all. And I mean, it's getting kind of close to, about the time the deer be up and moving. So I was like, I'm like,
probably trying to get in front of you and get to that ridge, huh?
Yeah, exactly. In the area, he kind of dove straight into the woods there, and he was in a good spot. I don't know if he saw anything. So long story short, I got into my spot. I got set up. I'm running that tree saddle from Tethered, and really like that. It's slick. It's quiet. So I jumped up in the tree and sat there for an hour and a half or so, and thought I heard almost heard something that sounded like a shot, and I saw the guy wandering around out in the goldenrod. It was just weird. I didn't know what to make of it. But by the time I got out of the woods, it was pitch dark, and saw his truck start up, and he was driving away. So either he shot and missed, or I don't know what was going on there. But Friday night was kind of a blown evening. Not really much going on. I saw one spiker that came running by right at the last light, but that was pretty quiet. Saturday morning, well, Friday night we had gone and retrieved AJ's buck, so that was kind of the highlight of Friday. And we'll let AJ tell his story. But then nothing of value happened Saturday morning. It was super quiet. And, out where we are, we're hunting farmland, so different than where our camp is in Naples and where Jimmy was up north. I kind of think you get a pretty consistent, like, people talk about the different movement patterns and, talk about the October lull. Like, I think we really see that. We really see that on the farm out here, that when they're not moving, they're not moving. And we're not pressuring them. Our approach to hunting in early season like this is we don't press deep into the property. We kind of hunt around the edges and hunt out on the edges of the fields. And, at this point, if we get an opportunity to buck, that's great. But we're really trying to shoot does right now. That's what our approach is the first 2-3 weeks of October, and then we kind of, as we get to the end of the month, we kind of start hunkering down, and we're after bucks. And so, that was mine and Brian, our primary goal this weekend was to get some does on the ground. And so Saturday morning, did see a couple does, but no shot opportunities, and same thing for Brian. And then Sunday morning went back out, hunted up in the front of the woods, just down the hedgerow from where I was on Saturday morning. And got in there nice and early. And, it's funny because Brian and I like to hunt close to each other whenever we go out. And the theory there being, if we're going to have wind blown, we might as well be blowing our wind in the same way, same direction. If we're going to blow out an area, might as well blow out an area and not mess up the whole block of woods. So him and I have been doing that. Areas. Yeah, and a lot of the stands we have set up are all in a line. And I don't know if that's on purpose. A lot of these stands have been there forever. They know this property like the back of their hands. So I kind of just follow suit. But we're sitting there, and we're about 70 yards apart, and it was dead all morning. And him and I are texting back and forth, and it's like 8:15, and he's like, Brian's like, I feel like there's a lot of things we should be doing right now that are probably not sitting in a tree stand. And I'm like, let's just give it till 9, and then we'll get down. And I was going to go to the Bills game, and he had some stuff he was going to do around the farm. And so I'm actually, in full honesty, I'm bored. I'm on my cell phone, and we're looking at getting some hats for Pertnear Outdoors. So I was on my phone, and Camel Fire was running a special on knit hats, like $1.99 a hat.
Really?
I got one in the cooler. Okay, so they're running this special for knit hats. I'm like, holy crap, that's a good deal. So I'm shopping on my phone. I buy some hats, and I literally
did you holler over to Brian, ask him if he wanted one?
Yeah, I said, hey, what color do you want? Yeah. Well, I mean, if our wind is blowing the same direction, might as well, they know we're there or whatever. Right. So I finished checking out, and I slide my phone. I got in the pouch in the front of my jacket, and and I kind of lift my head up, and I mean, right there, 20 yards, there's two does, and was a button buck and a doe, and I'm like, oh my God. And so this happened so fast. So she put her head down. I stand up, and I reach over and I grab my bow, and she looks back up, and she's trying to decide which trail she wants to go down. So she decides.
Now, are you in a saddle, or are you in a
no? I'm
stand?
In a ladder stand.
Okay.
Yeah, so just an open ladder stand in a big hemlock tree, or I guess it's a pine tree. So really good cover around me. So it was good. So she's coming, and she comes right straight to the trail that I'm right on. So she's gonna end up being. I didn't mark it out. I mean, it was probably under 10 yards. The shot was. Wow. But I mean, it all happened. It had to have been under 20 seconds that this whole thing transpired. I put my phone away, see her. She puts her head down, or she's looking the other way. I stand up, grab my bow, and this year I'm using a thumb release. So I switched over to that after last hunting season. I've got a knock to it, and I really like the release. I think it's helped me quite a bit. And so one of the things I'm liking about it is that it's already clipped on your string. So in that situation, everything happens super fast. I stand up, my release is already clipped on. I just put my hand in it, and I draw back as soon as I had the opportunity. I draw back, and she stops, and she's quartering right to me. So as I bring the string to my face, when you're using a thumb release, you got to get your index finger and your ring finger on each side of your jaw, and you want to get you got to get your thumb in the right spot, and then ideally you pull through the shot. Well, it all happened so fast I didn't have a chance to unzip my jacket, so it was right up to the bottom of my chin. So when I came back and I went to actually shoot, I couldn't get my hand in there, and I'm like, I didn't panic, but luckily I lined up my peep and I had everything in line, and I was looking through my sight and I was right on the deer, but I was trying to get my thumb to where it needed to be to go through my shot process. And when I got everything to where it needed, I got my thumb on there, it just hit the bow just went off. And I'm like, oh my God. And in the arrow, so I'm shooting a new arrow this year. I'm shooting a day 6 heavy arrow with an iron will broadhead, and this thing just right through this deer. But I didn't know if it went through the deer or not. The arrow was just like, you didn't hear it hit nothing. There was nothing.
Right. You thought it missed, right?
Bow went off. Deer just took like 20 bounds, not like I got shot bounds. Like, what the hell was that bounds? And then she's just standing there looking around, and I'm like, what? I'm like, you jackass. I'm like, you just missed a shot 10 yards. And I've chronicled my issues so far this hunting season. All this stuff's going through my head, so I'm reloading my bow, and I'm like, can I get a shot here? How far is she? And all of a sudden, she starts getting the wacky legs, and she tumbles down and thrashes into the pine, and she kicked for 5 seconds, and she's done. I'm like, wow. Oh my God. And Brian texts me, he goes, well, that was cool, because that's why because when him and I shoot stuff, it's like we're always in eyesight of each other. So the deer went towards him and stopped in the trail, and he's all jacked up because he's got the bow, and he's like, thinks this thing is coming to him. And then she flips over, and he's great. So him and I, we always just seem to have some fun stuff that happens when we're hunting close to each other. So yeah, I was pretty pumped. Ended up getting her back to the barn and hanging her up, and 117-pound doe.
Yeah,
so I'm pretty pumped about that. Yeah, it's a really good doe for around here, and a lot of good meat will come from that, and a little bit of pressure's off having something in the freezer. So pretty pumped about it, but definitely think that this weekend, I'm definitely looking forward to this weekend that things will start turning on and the activity will be elevated. So looking forward to it. I'm coming up to I haven't hunted up at camp yet this year, so I'll be down there. I'll be down there this weekend with you, Dad, and it sounds like Jimmy's gonna be there too. Nice. So it'll be fun to get the three of us together. We haven't been together in camp yet this year, so
yeah,
it'll be a good time.
They'll be moving.
So last week on this podcast here, you were talking about relaxing and just taking it easy and letting things happen. And last year, you almost did the same thing. You were playing on your cell phone, mostly because I was texting you about the 8 points that I shot. But last year, you were playing on your cell phone too, and you shot your 8 points.
Yeah, so maybe that's a good thing. I thought you were going a different direction. But maybe I should be on my
Just keep your phone out.
Well, the other part of that was, you were talking about relaxing, and I would say you're pretty relaxed if you put your bow up there and all of a sudden it just goes off. So that works out well.
Where'd you hit it?
Hit her, so she was quartering to. I hit her right behind the shoulder high, not too high, but about mid body, and
nice.
And it was angled away, and it came out the bottom. So actually, I was, obviously I knew she was laying there right there dead. But what was pretty amazing is that I center punched the onside lung, and it actually exited through the stomach, and so the arrow it was all stomach matter on the arrow. So and she didn't bleed at all, and that's the only downside I'll say with the iron will in any small cutting diameter broadhead is that you just don't get the blood trails that you do with a rage.
Well, especially Bill, if you get an exit wound out the stomach, there's a lot of matter there that's going to plug that hole.
Right.
You don't get a good bleed there. If it had been out of the chest cavity, you probably would have leaked out pretty
like
sufficient.
Brian said, he's like, man, he goes, this just goes to show. He's like, if she took 2 bounds and went in some goldenrod and then took off into the woods, and you didn't hear her crash, you wouldn't know what, granted the blood, there was matter on the arrow, there was stuff on the arrow, but like there was no blood to go by. It just goes to show, like, you gotta, I mean, she didn't go anywhere, so it's super obvious that she was dead, but you don't know. And any of these track jobs, it's like you gotta, you had that track job, Jimmy, where you made the decision, but you didn't have the arrow, you kind of let that go.
Yeah.
And, with AJ will tell his story, but, his arrow didn't pass through, but we got the arrow, and immediately looking at the arrow, we all came to the assumption like that deer's dead. And we've all seen arrows and what blood looks like on them, and you can kind of make a judgment. But I'm a huge advocate for any sharp fixed blade broadhead. I'm really becoming an advocate for it because that arrow went through that deer so fast, and she had no idea what hit her. And that, I mean, center punching that heart, that hole was so clean, that thing just bled. I mean, the whole, when I cut the diaphragm and was field dressing her, I mean, it was all blood inside. Like, she bled out like that quickly. And I think that's what you get with those fixed blade broadheads that are super, super sharp. Some of these expandables are good, but if you don't get the right hit, and you hit something like a stomach or you hit, a shoulder, you're just not, that blade is immediately, what do you want to say? It's just, it loses its sharpness, or it might get bent, or it ricochets. I'm becoming a huge advocate for it.
I think I'm going to be looking into that next year, because that buck that I shot this year, if I'd have had a heavy arrow set up with a fixed blade, it would have blown through it for sure.
Yep.
Because I'm using a light arrow and a expandable, and I know if I'd have had a heavy arrow with a fixed blade, it would have blown right through that deer, and I would have known right then that I didn't hit gut. But I think that's something that is definitely to be said for, is having a good heavy setup with a fixed blade. I mean, the expandables are good, but I think, like you said, you get into that bone and stuff, and you want something that'll blow through it.
Yep.
Well, boys, it's just like my ties. I look in the closet, and I got some 30 years ago they were in style, 15 years ago they weren't, and they're coming back in. So I think back to in the 70s when I was started out bow hunting, and I had a Zwickey fixed blade, 2-blade broadhead with a big old heavy arrow. And I can remember guys, taking the arrows going, man, that's like a log throwing at him, And I shot one buck, and I hit him in the shoulder and took him right off his feet, knocked him right off the ridge he was standing on, But, and it kind of, and it was a slower bow, right? I had this was older archery equipment. I think I was shooting a 6-pulley Allen Speedster back at the time. And, but I'll tell you, you heard that thing, I whacked that thing in the shoulder and took that buck right off his feet like you hit him with a gun. But it's funny how, I'm still shooting as Jimmy said, I'm shooting a smaller spline, a lighter arrow with a mechanical broadhead, and I've had great luck the last several years killing deer with it. But I buy into the theory and the science behind the the heavier arrow and the kinetic energy that carries in a good sharp fixed blade broadhead, especially on angle shots, where it's quartered 2 year away. And
I bet you that doe that you hit last weekend would have been a pass through if you had a heavier setup.
Yep. There's no reason, shooting whatever I'm shooting 60 pounds, at 23 yards, I mean, I should have blown right through the deer, not, with where the hit was. So, but it's something I had intended to get into that this year, and I just didn't have the time, but I do hope to pursue that and try some different equipment next year, kind of move towards a heavier setup, Billy, like you have.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I mean, my sales pitch for Iron Will, I've tried a few different brands of fixed blade, and trying to have a heavier setup with the fixed blade broadhead. And I keep coming back to the Iron Will for 2 reasons. The thing shoots extremely true. I didn't have to do any tuning from my field point. I'm not saying that'd be the same for everybody and every bow, but I'm shooting a super heavy arrow, so I'm not shooting real fast. And then I put that iron will broadhead on, and it's patterning very, very close to my field tip, so I'm not messing with anything. And then number 2 is the durability and the lifetime warranty you get with that broadhead. You're going to spend $100 or $115, whatever ends up being on those broadheads. You get 3 of them. But I shot that buck last year. That arrow passed through the deer, hit a rock, and it bent the tip of that blade over. And I contacted customer support and told them what happened, sent them a picture, and in the mail a week later I get a brand new blade. And it's like,
wow.
You go and shoot, you miss a deer with a Rage.
Oh, yeah.
That thing's done. And
yeah, I use them once. If I shoot it at a deer, it's done.
Yeah, it's $30 every time you buy one of those packages at the least.
Yeah.
Some of these new ones are $60. So it's like just thinking about the money.
Said, they have been devastating on some of the deer I've taken the last few years. They've really done well, and they fly very good. So,
yeah.
But I don't
have anything.
It's a single use,
Right. I don't have anything against them either. It's just, for me, it's like if I always end up focusing on that shoulder. And I know, Jimmy, I know you've had it happen a pile of times where you've hit bucks on the shoulder, and it haunts you. And it's like if you were shooting a heavier arrow with a really good quality fixed blade broadhead, you would be in that cavity and that deer would be dead. And it's like, so if I'm in a spot where it seems like every shot opportunity I've had in the last few years has been under 10 yards, like no joke. And if you have on a deer, you have such a small window to try to get that arrow into to have a good lethal kill. It's like if you can not worry about if you're going to hit that shoulder or not and just hammer it home, like that's a huge peace of mind when you're trying to make that shot and you got buck fever and you can't get your thumb on the button and everything else. Like
the bow goes off unexpectedly and
just on its own.
I've never had a surprise shot until Sunday. That was my first surprise shot I've ever had. I hear all these people talking about the journey, and I finally had it happen.
It triggers us. If you love something, let it free.
Yeah. Oh, shit. So, all right. Well, we just successfully talked for 45 minutes. So,
yeah. So much for our 20-minute chat.
It's just the way this is going to go. So I hope people enjoy listening to it. And I guess the last thing.
With you guys.
You always got to have the last word, don't you? I guess I always have to have the last word. But
go ahead.
In all seriousness, so last thing I have is if you want to definitely encourage everyone that's listening to use the hashtag Breedinum on Instagram. And what we'll do is, if you hashtag, if you shoot a deer or you want to get on the podcast because you had something cool happen out there, hashtag Breedinum, and we're following that hashtag. And we'll definitely try to get you involved. We want this to be an interactive thing. We're only in week 2 here. We got a lot of season left, and we definitely want to get as many people involved as we can and share as many real life, up to the minute stories about what's going on around our area. So please participate if you wish. Do you guys have anything else before we wrap it up?
Just keep breeding.
No, sir. Yep. Look forward to getting out there and seeing some chasing or some seeking. I think we'll be into some good seeking this week. So,
yeah, it'll be a good
weekend.
Looking
forward to it. All right, Ben. We'll talk to you later. See you this weekend.
See you.
Sounds good. Breed 'em.
All right. Feeding them.
All right. So joining me now on the phone is my brother-in-law AJ Hibsch. He lives right out here where I live in Strikersville, New York. And last Friday night, he was able to connect on a nice 10-pointer with his bow. So, AJ, thanks for jumping on, and we want to hear the story about how it all came together. So, where were you? What were you doing as far as what type of stand setup were you in, and how did it all go down with that buck coming in on you?
Yeah, I was on a corner of a cornfield and an alfalfa field, probably on a 15-foot ladder stand in a tree. I've been hunting there, probably was my second time in that tree stand this year. Third time in the tree stand this year. It was 10 minutes before dark. A couple of doe had come out to my right into the cornfield. Probably 5 minutes before I could hear this buck come walking in their footsteps. I didn't really get a good look on him until he was right alongside of me, about 20 yards away. I started counting points on him, and I got up to 3 or 4 points and let her rip.
Just like that.
Yeah, just like that.
So he came. So that buck came from behind you, and
yeah, came
when
from behind me. So one of the first times I was in the tree stand, he did the same thing. He came up from behind me, and I wasn't paying attention. There was some doe in the field, and I stood up to get a better look at the doe and spooked him from underneath me. It had to be, I think, the first week of the season. So I knew he was out there. He liked to. We know from last year too that the bucks like to skirt that side of the woods that I was in, following that cornfield. So he did the same thing again this time, and I was quiet enough and smart enough to get a shot on him. The shot was about 20 yards, just quartering away a little bit. So.
Yeah, so you hit him right behind the shoulder, and we know now, and we knew once we started tracking him that it was a pretty damn good shot. But your original, you called me right after you shot.
Yeah, originally I thought I hit the shoulder, and the arrow bounced right off. So I'm a relatively new hunter here. This is only my third deer, so my first phone call was to Billy to help track, because I thought I would need help tracking. So I waited till dark. I grabbed my arrow, went back to the truck, and waited for Bill to come over and help. And once we got back to where my arrow was, and I pointed everything out, there was no question that it was a good hit. The arrow worked itself out from the back shoulder right away. I mean, within 10 yards, he had the arrow out of his shoulder.
Yeah, so that shot, as it entered right behind the shoulder, quartering away, it hit that offside shoulder, and that AJ shooting a rage broadhead, and that thing cut him open good, and he hammered both lungs, and it hit the offside shoulder, and that arrow, with his reaction, AJ's reaction, that he didn't hit it that well, the arrow was just flopping around, and it, that hole is so big from that rage broadhead that it's nothing for that thing to slip back out. And, as soon as we all met at the truck after dark there, it was when we all saw the arrow, Brian walked up and asked him what he thought, and the first thing he said was dead, because there was so much blood. The arrow only penetrated like 2/3, but you had so much blood splattered up on the arrow, and the way that it was splattered, that's the sign of a great hit. So it was, as soon as we got on that blood trail, there was no doubter that thing was not going to be very far. It was pretty impressive, that blood trail. So that was awesome. So super happy for you. Now you got a little pressure off until gun season, and I'm sure that's in good time, because there's been some sickness traveling around your household, I understand, and it's migrating to mine. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it made it through all the kids, and now it's on to the next family. So.
Yeah, gotta love it. Well, congratulations, and
thank you.
And I know that's the second of many more to come, and hopefully you get out a little bit more and try to put some does in the freezer here during archery. But congrats, thanks for jumping on, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thank you, Bill.
All right, see you, buddy. On the line with me right now is my buddy and my gym partner, my homie that I work out with every morning, Scott Murray. So Scott's he's a member of Hunters Creek Outdoors, and he is local to the Western New York area. So I wanted to get Scott on because he's got kind of some unique stuff that he's chasing around, and keeps a pretty close tab on the deer that he's after each year. So I wanted to try to get Scott on, and he's probably be one of the more regulars, irregardless of whether he kills something or not, just because I think he's got a pretty good pulse on what's going on, as well as the guys in the Hunters Creek group, they got a pretty good pulse on the deer that are on their properties that they hunt. So, Scott, welcome, and thanks for jumping on today.
No problem. Great.
Yeah. So, I guess kind of just run around, or I guess kind of explain what you're seeing right now in your area. You've got some property pretty close to home that you're able to watch pretty closely. You got some cell phone cameras that you're running just about year-round, so you're always kind of knowing what's going on with the deer and as they're coming and going. So, what are you seeing right now for activity over the last couple weeks, and then what's been happening, especially the last 4 or 5 days?
Well, actually, I mean, I've had a pretty good start to the season. I've had 2 really good opportunities at nice bucks, but I, like you said, I kind of have close tabs on a few bucks right in, really close to home, and one in particular that I'm hunting, that I've told you several times about. The action's been pretty good for me, but on the other hand, a couple guys that I hunt with, really haven't seen a ton. So, right place, right time, or just right place with right conditions. Every single one of the bucks that there's 3 in particular, one really in particular, I should say, 3 that I would like to shoot. All 3 of them were on camera daylight that first week of October. Of course, I wasn't in the stand.
Right.
Since then, they're still pretty active, but not daylight. There are a couple other bucks that I would think that are 2.5, maybe 3.5 that I've actually seen daylight, but not close, not real close to me, but just from an observation stand, without infringing on the core area where I think the deer are or whatever. I saw I was out with my son the other night, and we saw 3 small bucks, and we saw one other really nice buck, and then the very next day I saw another really nice buck who will be real dandy next year, out pushing does and pushing small bucks all around a food plot. But like I said, I watched that from afar, not close or anything like that.
Yep. So you've kind of, as we had some guys on last week that shot bucks on Columbus Day, you saw some pretty good activity that weekend as well, correct? I mean, you had an encounter on Columbus Day with a pretty decent buck on your way into your stand, right?
Yes, I was heading into a spot that we've watched the buck pretty much all summer feeding a nice I would say probably a 135 inch 10-pointer, and I told my friend Ryan about it, and he was coming to video for me, run the camera. And I was just taking one step up on the ladder. I mean, it's only 10 after 4 in the afternoon. And he was like, big buck. It's a 10-pointer. It's a 10-pointer. Now, mind you, Ryan has never laid eyes on a 10-pointer other than just me telling him about it. And, so I got down. He helped get my bow off the rope, the bow rope. I got an arrow knocked. And then it was a 10-pointer, but it wasn't the 10-pointer. But he was a mature deer. I mean, he was, I would have to guess 17, 18 inches wide and heavy, nice big main beams, rack. But his points were like 2 inches tall. So I, with the situation that I have where there's really, a couple bucks that I really would like to shoot, I just, being so early in the season, I neglected, or I guess I elected to pass, and he walked by about, we figured it was about 18 yards or so. And he was a nice mature deer, at least 3.5. He could have been, his body was huge. I mean, when you're on the ground, on a knee, and you have a deer at, 18 yards, and doesn't have a clue that you're there, it's just especially a mature deer, it's different than a fawn or a doe. So that was a really good action. Really surprised that he was on his feet at, 4:15 or 4:10 in the afternoon, and then heading toward a field that had corn in it. But they were actually, that day, were chopping the corn. So all kinds of racket going on. And he was probably 200 yards, 250 yards from that cornfield. And then he got to about, we figured about 12, 13 yards, and he caught a little bit of movement. He bounded about 50, 60 yards, and then he just walked away.
Yeah.
So, you know.
So you had a good interaction with him, and then this past weekend you had that nice encounter with the deer down at, you have a family camp down in Chautauqua County, and you had a pretty good interaction there, which was kind of encouraging but different. Most people I talked to, and including myself and my family, nobody really saw much for decent buck activity, and you had a pretty good run-in with a buck down there. What was that stand setup like, just out of curiosity, because nobody else was really seeing bucks? What was your setup like down there at your camp?
Yeah, it's kind of a transition area between, food, which is up toward the road more, and it kind of a transition. When I say transition, between hardwoods and thick, undergrowth as far as young beech, raspberries, sporadic apple trees in there, and then this is the start of the hardwoods, heading back down to a little bit of a bottom and then up onto a ridge that was logged, a few years back. So he was, I first got in the stand and heard a grunt, and it sounded like a young buck grunt to me. It didn't sound like a mature grunt. And out of nowhere, all of a sudden, 15 minutes later, some does come busting out, and it ended up being a tiny buck. You could barely see its antlers. I mean, they were so small. It was like probably one of the worst bucks I've ever seen in my life. And I thought, that was the grunt, and then out of the raspberries and the young beech, another fawn, it looked like, probably the fawn for the doe, came busting out, and then I heard, the big loud, and that's definitely not the same buck as this little one right here. And they just kind of ran behind me, and then the buck that made that loud grunt, and he popped a couple times too, pops before he let that, that loud mature grunt out. And then he walked right down, fed on raspberry leaves, made a scrape, and then I finally was able to get the camera on him, and I was self-filming that time, and he walked, eventually he walked right down past me 17 yards, and then headed, down that little bit of that, the little bit of I wouldn't say a valley, like a little bit down, and then back, I imagine back up on that ridge to bed for the rest of the day. But it was encouraging. He was pushing does. I imagine they were all coming back from feed.
Yeah.
It was later, like 8:15 in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning. Or he crossed paths with them coming back from feed or whatever. That's my guess.
Yeah. Just checking them out more than anything.
Yeah, he wasn't. They ran behind me, and he came down. He didn't even, eventually. I mean, he cut their tracks again, and he didn't even follow them. He just kept going straight. Yeah. So like I said, I imagine he just kind of was checking things and just trying to show, maybe even because that little buck was in that group, show his dominance over him maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you guys got some dandies on camera down there too. Have any of those popped up on camera since the middle of September, or no?
No, not really. To be honest with you, come the first week of October, or that last week of September, a lot of them disappeared. I will say, I think one buck, my buddy said he did have him on camera on one of the scrapes in daylight. It must have been last week Thursday. It was before the weekend. And other than that, a couple distant pictures on the cam that, they're blurry or whatever, so it's hard to tell really if it's one of those ones. I mean, but we had probably 5 bucks that were, without hesitation shooters. And the buck that I passed up, because I videoed him, my brother's like, Ryan, who they have property that borders ours and butts up to ours, he's like, I don't have that deer on camera. My brother said he has that deer, and thinks we have that deer on camera, but from like July.
Huh. Okay.
Who knows? He was all, August, September. Yeah,
it's funny how they they just disappear and then they show up, and you got resident deer all summer, and then as soon as you can be all excited and watching them in the fields or on trail camera, and as soon as that velvet comes off, they're gone, and you don't see them until, we had a camera that soaked all year last year at our farm, and we had bucks that we had pictures of all summer, no pictures at all during deer season, and then as soon as season closed, all of a sudden there they are showing up on camera again. It's like, where did you go and what have you been doing, And this is on a community scrape, so you're kind of getting a pretty good inventory of what's in the area. But
yeah, I wonder. I wonder if they just, are really starting to test, which are the dominant bucks in the area and where can they get away with, checking does and not getting, their buck kicked or whatever.
Yeah.
At least I think, and I think if they're younger, 2.5, 3.5-year-old bucks, 4.5, and I'm using the one that I'm, trying to kill, obviously, because I figure he's 6.5. When he was 3.5, that's the fewest amount of pictures I had. When he was 2.5, I had him all the way up to probably the third week of October, and then he was gone for most of the year, most of the rest of the season. And then 3.5, I only had 3 pictures of him all late summer and fall. So now that he's older, is when he got older, I've been getting more consistent pictures. But you never know. That could totally change, too.
Yeah. Yeah, if you get some 2.5 or 3.5-year-old buck come in there that with a hell of an attitude, he could easily push him out of there if he doesn't want to compete with that, So it's interesting, and it's going to be fun to follow along here in the next 3-4 weeks as you try to get that one on the ground. So I got faith in you.
Well, we'll see. I think when I'm telling people that I pass up these deer and they may think I'm a little nuts, and then I think to myself, maybe I'm a little nuts because I've never had an opportunity to kill him yet. Well, I take that back, one opportunity, but it was just too dark when he came out, and it was during gun season. So, other than that, and I probably would have shot him when he was 2.5 because he was pretty nice. And at that time, I thought maybe 3.5. And my buddy laid eyes on him but couldn't get a shot. And then never laid eyes on him until, I was hunting till last year. And but it was just getting too dark, and it was with the gun. And I just, came out just before last light, and he didn't get close up to me before. It was just couldn't, shoot anymore. So it'll be interesting, because I think, maybe I might not ever even see this deer again, But that's the fun. I tell you that all the time. I just love the chess match and trying to play the wind, and then the good thing about this sport of archery and deer hunting in general is you never know what's going to come walking down that trail.
Yep, exactly. And that's, I don't know how, but we always fill an hour's worth of gym time in the morning talking about the same shit over and over again. I don't know how we do it, but every morning our trail cameras are sending us pictures, and we're talking, and it's fun. So, all right. In kind of wrapping this up, what's your plans for the weekend? Are you hunting local? Or are you going to head down to your camp, or what's your plans?
To be honest with you, at this point I don't really know, because I had an uncle pass Tuesday. So we have the wake and funeral on Friday. I have a buddy that needs me to give him hand do a metal roof on his house. So I honestly, at this point, I don't even know if I'm going to – I really would like to go down to camp, but if I do go down to camp, it's going to be like probably hunt in the afternoon, hunt in the morning, come back home.
Yeah.
So I try to, do both, but I don't even know. If I have to give one of them up, I'll probably just stay around home,
Yeah. So what's your plan as far as this weekend? We're kind of getting close to starting to get into that seeking phase here. We got some good, it looks like we're going to have a cold front here right before the weekend, and maybe we'll have some decent deer activity throughout the weekend. So are you going to be getting aggressive, or are you still going to kind of be laying back?
No.
What's your plan?
If wind's good for a good spot, I'm going into it, just because, I killed, the 3 biggest bucks I've ever killed with my bow. I killed on the 25th, the 26th, and 31st of October.
Yep.
So, my biggest archery bucks obviously were then, and so I'm gonna, if it looks really good, and my uncle's funeral is Friday morning at 10, I'm going to probably hunt in the morning until 9 o'clock, you know?
Yeah.
Because I'm anyway. So, you know, if the wind's good, I'm going to go into, you know, my best spots now because, you know, and again, too, you know, being in an area like this, you know, there's property all around me that people are hunting. So you don't know what pressure is that they're putting on the deer either. So I can't just sit back and can't sit back and be like, I can't pressure these deer because I'm sure on the property around, they're getting pressured pretty good already, you know?
Yep. Yeah, you can only control your back 40. You know, you really can't control what your neighbor's doing. And it might be a perfect wind for you to sit X stand, but your neighbor might be sitting in his perfect stand that's blowing all his wind onto your property. So you really don't know what's going on. So, yeah, if you got the opportunity, I think the moral of that is, you know, pick your good spot that's good for that wind or good for that weather and just get in there and get after it.
Yeah, and I will too. No matter what time of year I'm going to stand, I am very, very conscious and try my hardest, which is not to get out of there. To get out, it bothers me more as I'm getting older to get out of the stand and get back to wherever the trail is that I'm walking out, like without being detected. But I mean, it makes me cringe sometimes when I get busted. You know, deer take off running or blow or something. You know what I mean? Because I think
I know exactly.
So, but yeah, I say you just go for it. I mean, unless you got 500 acres that you know that no one else is on, and you know it's that. I mean, the scrapes are, you know, one camera I put up 2 weeks ago. I checked it a week later. I had 10 pictures on it. I checked it this week after another week. It's on a scrape. That's a scrape there every year. It had 50 pictures on it. Some were does, but some were a couple bucks. So that just goes to show they're starting to move a little more. They're starting to get a little bit antsy. So I think you got to take those opportunities and get with good wind and you know, get to your spots.
Absolutely. All right, last question for you, then we're rolling. Do you think they're primarily feeding or do you think they're breeding?
Is this a joke? Or is this...
No, it's serious. I mean, do you think they're focused on feeding or breeding?
I still think they're focused on feeding.
All right. That's all we need from you, sir.
All right.
I'll see you in the morning. Tomorrow's arm day. Get jacked up.
That's right. Fill your sleeves, right?
All right, so joining me on the line, I've got a former baseball teammate from back in high school. So I got Ricky Mura on the phone. And so Ricky and I have kind of stayed in touch over the years, but he has recently moved into Lima, New York, and doing some hunting around there. And we've kind of gotten back in touch through that, as well as through my brother, plays some softball with him during the summer. So thanks, Ricky, for jumping on, and congratulations on the beautiful buck you shot.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No problem. So run us through it. I guess, you know, what day did you connect, and where were you?
So it was I took a 4-day weekend, and this was on Monday, October 21st. We have a 62-acre camp down in Wayland, New York, Steuben County. And I actually put a few food plots in this summer. I was sitting over one that I've been seeing quite a bit of activity at. I had 3 shooter bucks on my trail cam at this one location. I got in my stand about 7 o'clock that morning. It was about 30 degrees. There was frost on the ground. Sat all morning, didn't see anything. About 11 o'clock, I actually had a turkey hen and 3 poults come in. I watched them for about an hour. Stayed in the stand, sat all afternoon. It wound up being a beautiful day. It got up to about 60 degrees. Not a cloud in the sky. You know, you get pretty bored at that point, wondering if maybe you made the wrong choice, sat in the wrong stand, and you know, I just kept telling myself, just wait it out. I know I've been seeing this deer in the afternoon coming through the food plot. Right about 10 to 5, I could see something
off in the distance in the woods, and I couldn't make out if it was a deer or if I was just seeing shadows from the sun. And right about 5 o'clock, I saw him walking in about 100 yards out, right off to my left side. There's an apple tree right on the edge of that food plot. My trail cam set up right next to that on a tree. And he walked in, he stopped and ate a couple apples on the ground, and then kept walking in, and he walked in broadside to me about 25 yards out right in the middle of the food plot. All by himself, just grazing. I took the shot, hit him right in the double lunged him. He ran off about 50 yards, and I heard him crash, and hung out for about a half hour. I was pretty pumped because I knew which one he was based on my scouting. When I got up to him, that was the one I was patterning, seeing him come in the afternoon. So that's how it happened that day.
That's awesome. That's like exactly how you want to draw it up, right?
Yeah, I couldn't have drawn it up any better, I was telling people. So
yeah, it's awesome.
It was a good shot, broadside. He was right where I wanted him.
Yep. So a couple questions on that. So where your guys' camp is, it's not too far from where we are, where our camp is in Naples. But what's the terrain like there? Are you down in the bottom? Because kind of the way that Wayland is in Steuben County, the majority of it's a lot of kind of bottom land, and then you've got some pretty aggressive hills, but you've got a lot of really good ag land in the bottoms. So where's your property? What's the setup like that?
So we actually have a creek that is spring fed off the hill, and it's right on the south end of our property that it essentially starts. It runs all the way through our property. It creates about 4 or 5 different ponds, which that creek actually ends up feeding Loon Lake and Wayland.
Okay.
But our terrain, it starts off, and then it's basically a big valley. So the roadside is real brush when you get down all the way down into the pond area, and then just past the other side of the ponds, it's all hardwoods all the way up a hill, and then it overlooks the entire Loon Lake. So that brush area, it's always a big bedding area for them. We know a couple spots we kind of stay out of, that they're constantly either moving out in the morning or going to at night, coming into our property to bed. A lot of acorns and hardwoods up in the woods. We see quite a bit of a buck moving up there, especially late season. So
yeah, sweet. So and with that, I'm guessing kind of the way you just laid it out, but it sounds like, I mean, this deer was very comfortable and up and just moving at 5 o'clock at night. So I'm guessing you guys are pretty cognizant about how you're traveling through your property and when you're traveling through your property to try to make sure you're keeping the deer relaxed and on their normal schedules, right?
Yeah, there's certain areas, that we picked out. Like I said, we know where they're bedding down, so we don't hardly ever walk through there. Maybe in the off season, early spring, something like that, we'll go through and see if we can find any sheds, something along that lines. But once we get into early summer and start planting and really grooming our spots all summer and stuff like that, we stay out of those areas. We pretty much only go in to where the stands that we're thinking we're going to hunt that year. We got about probably 13 stands on the property, and this year we're only hunting about half of those. So, like I said, we'll set some trail cams up early, like August, and see kind of where they're moving. And I put 2 of the food plots in late August, and then I put one in about mid-September in another area that I was thinking would be a good spot, and they've worked out all pretty well. So,
what do you got down for food?
We put down the Antler King honey hole mix in one of them, and then the Lights Out mix in 2 of the other ones. And then we also bought turnip and radish seeds and just sprinkled that in with the mix for a little
hopefully late season is what we're hoping. Something they'll be digging at still.
Nice. Sounds like a pretty sweet setup down there. Here, Steuben County's become quite the place to be, so that's awesome you got property down there.
Yeah. We're always looking for more, so.
So I guess, yeah, I bet you are. Everybody is. That's why I think it's getting even a lot of hunting leases down there are popping up. And there's not much for state land. You know, there is a little bit further south in Steuben County, but there's really not a ton of state land in that county. So.
No, when we're down there, we got a better chance of going over to Allegheny where there's more state land.
Yep.
Oh.
All right, so you answered pretty much everything I think I wanted to know. It sounds like it was just you had a plan, it worked out to a T, you knew who the buck was, and you put him on the ground. So was that one of your best bucks yet, or? Yeah,
that was one of my, I have top 3 shooters, and that was my number 2 I was looking at. So there's another 10-point out there. I don't have him as patterned as I had this one, but I see him about once a week, so
As far as deer you've shot, is this one of the best you've gotten before?
Yeah, it's one of my bigger ones. Yep.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a beauty. And we'll post that up when we post this podcast. We'll post that up for everybody to see.
Awesome.
So, congratulations on that. And I guess the last question I have, which I think you already answered too, but do you think he was feeding or was he breeding?
No, I think he was feeding still. He wasn't. His neck looked, it was definitely getting bloated, but he was still coming in slow. He didn't have his nose down really, on the move really fast at all. He was walking in slow, just picking at stuff as he was moving in. So, but I don't think we're far from that.
Nope, we aren't. And luckily, you're not going to be one that we have to compete with out there.
Yeah, there you go.
You can hang up the cleats for a few weeks.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. That's all I got. Thanks for jumping on. Congratulations, and go get one of those big ones during gun.
You got it, brother. Thanks for having me. It was good talking to you.
Yeah. Feed them.
All right, man. We'll see you.
Bye. Connor.
Bill, you there? Hey.
Oh. Hey, Connor.
Hey, buddy. Hey,
what's up?
Oh, nothing.
So
what's going on? How does this work? Want me to start talking?
Well, yeah, I'll introduce you, and then we want to hear your story because I understand that you had a pretty exciting hunt last night. So, on the phone here. Hey, you hold on. I'll introduce you, and then you talk. All right. So on the horn here, we have got Connor Holly. Many of you may know Connor. Connor is one of my good friends from home, where we were high school buddies and college roommates, and Connor's really gotten into hunting in the last few years, and last year we were able to get him his first deer on the ground. So Connor is heavy into it this year, and we've been staying in touch, trying to figure out our hunting plans together, especially as we get in towards the rut and into gun season. So Connor hit me up last night, and he was out for an evening sit after work, and sounds like he had a pretty exciting hunt. So what's up, buddy? And run us through what happened.
Yeah, no, it was a fun night. It's been pretty slow. So I'm hunting a property in Henrietta, and it's been pretty slow. I would say the last 3 times I've sat, so over the past week and a half, I just haven't really seen much action. Right now I had my stand in this, I guess it would be like a transition area between this open field and then a really dense pocket with a lot of trails, and then it opened up into more open woods. And so I was sitting in there because I was seeing some rubs and some really good deer sign. And last night I was just so bored. We were having 45 mile per hour gusts of wind, and I was like, okay. It was 5:45, and I've been sitting for an hour and a half, and I was like, I'm done. I'm gonna get out of my stand and just kind of see what's going on because I hadn't seen anything. And so I kind of got out of my stand, hiked into that field, into this clearing, and there's a little hill that kind of goes up before it flattens out, and then there's a downed tree about 70 or 80 yards in front of that. So I kind of crawled up and just got my binoculars out and just took a look ahead just to make sure I didn't spook anything, and instantly pick up on a set of antlers. So in about 10 seconds I can make out a really, really nice 8-point. So I get all flustered, I'm getting all excited, so I throw back down and I just sort of just kind of get on the hill. And I just start taking off my gear. So I had my harness on from sitting in my tree stand. So I took that off, took my bino harness off, just kind of got everything out of my pockets, took my backpack off, and I started to make a very slow crawl about 80 yards in front of me to see if I could set myself up for a better shot. Where the deer was, is it was the buck was just sort of had its back to me and was just grazing, so I had no idea where I was, and the wind was fantastic. Certainly in my favor, and so let's give it a shot. If I can make it happen, like get my first buck with a bow like this, that'd be a really, really cool story. So I start making the crawl. I'm crawling on my belly. I probably make it 60 yards, and I'm looking. I haven't really seen any movement. I don't know where the deer went. And as I'm getting up a little bit closer, I probably get into within 25, 30 yards, and I look over to the right, and I just make eye contact with this doe, and she's got 2 little fawns with her. And so they freak out, start snorting and running. I didn't see the buck run away, but obviously, he bolted when they started making all that noise. So I got jumped, and so where I was, and I didn't. It's funny, when it all starts happening and your adrenaline starts kicking in, you get real stupid, And so afterwards, I just kind of sat there and reflected on maybe how I could have approached that situation better. And the best thing probably would have been to use this tall grass that was off to my left. So 80 yards in front of me of a down tree, really great cover from the standpoint of the deer probably wouldn't be able to see me crawling. But that leaves my whole, right side open to if there were any does or any other deer in the woods. And then off to my left by probably 20 yards is this really tall grass that sort of wraps around this area where there's shorter grass. After thinking about it, I was like, God, you know what? It probably would have been the harder choice. It would have been the harder route, but I think I could have got myself up into that tall grass and kind of come around him, and that probably would have given me a better opportunity to take the deer. But you live and you learn, and I guess that's why we go out all the time.
Absolutely,
so,
and
that was kind of the story.
Yeah, that's a sweet story, and I think you'll find like you gotta do that stuff. Like you're new to it,
yeah.
And you're gonna make those mistakes, and it's learning from them. And I mean, even myself, I do stuff like that all the time, where you get locked in on a certain deer, and you forget about the fact that there could be other sets of eyes watching you. And so, like, you got to slow yourself down and think about what other stuff is going on around you and the other factors that could play into whether you get a shot at that deer or not. So it's cool that you had that opportunity and you had a good learning experience there. And that's awesome.
And coming off 3 or 4 sits where you're not seeing any deer and you're basically bored out of your mind. It was just nice to get some adrenaline running, and it was good to get out of the stand and get moving around. So that was cool.
Yeah. So that buck was by himself.
Yeah, Buck was by himself. When I spooked him, it seemed like this was 5:45, and it was still very light, and he was wide out in the open, and it looks like he was hanging out with anywhere from like 3 to 5 does. Because after that, I climbed up into an old stand that nobody's using anymore, that's positioned off of that field, and I sat there. I was like, I'm already here. I might as well just sit until dusk. And I think those same those does came back in. I think they kind of looped around and then came back out into the field from behind me. Now again, I don't know that, but I didn't see that 8-point again. But right around dusk, a little, a 4-point, was kind of walked behind the stand, and then right around 6:30, 2 really good 6 points walked out behind me. Now sunset's technically at 6:15, and so at that point, you're not supposed to take any shots at deer, and it was too dark, so I didn't take a shot at the 6 point. But man, yeah, I saw 4 bucks moving around last night, and so I think it's really gearing up. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm really excited for this weekend. I'm hunting. I'm gonna hunt tomorrow morning. I'm gonna hunt tomorrow night. I'm basically gonna be in the tree stand all weekend. So I think it's gonna come soon.
Awesome. So I've been asking this. I've been on this asking this question in closing with everyone. Do you, from what you saw, do you think they're more focused on feeding or breeding right now?
I kind of, if you would ask me, yesterday before I hunted, I would have said feeding. I think they're.
Connor, I think I lost you. Connor says that his anticipation was they were feeding, but it sounds like they're starting to think about breeding. So get out there, hang your stand, and whack a big one. See ya.